It is a war on weeds. We're constantly trying to fight that invasiveness. We're talking years and years, decades. These weeds can last a long time underground. They're waiting just for anybody to agitate that soil before they make their emergence. And whether we actually have a real live fire or we have disturbance of the ground, any type of disturbance will make those seeds come to life. And it is and can be very well likened to a slow burn where the seeds just simmer and the embers are underground and the seeds erupt once that soil is disturbed. My role in invasive species is basically outreach education. So we provide outreach education to adults and youth. Our goal is to educate people on identifying what noxious weeds are, how to control them, how to best plan for mitigating the spread of noxious weeds. They have a strong will to live, so they need little water and they can thrive under the worst conditions, whereas a native species or a preferred species of plant would fail. So controlling noxious weeds is necessary so that they don't take over the spread of our cultural plants, our native plants, our traditional use medicine plants, that type of thing.
Okay, growing up here back in the 50s and 60s, things are very simple. Although we did the farming, we still had to spend time doing the traditional gathering. And my great-grandmother and grandmother always collected. They gathered, and they were longhouse gatherers. And so we'd have bitter roots, we'd have camas.
Well, traditionally, Colville tribal members got their food from the land. We were hunters, gatherers, fishers. And if we do not have a safe place to grow our food, we do not have healthy food. So we are encouraging people to learn about land management, learn about the types of crops that grow here, learn about the weeds that are invasive, learn about the species that invade our waters, and protect the environment as much as possible. We want to have these waters and lands available for future generations.
With classical biocontrol, what we're doing is we're going back to where the plant is native to. So all of these weeds are not native here. So for instance, spotted knapweed is native to Eurasia. All of the things that are feeding on it there are keeping their populations in check, so they aren't outcompeting all of our native species. So we have all these different things that feed on it there, and we look at insects and pathogens and all sorts of things like that that are causing damage to the plant. And we go through lots and lots of testing to make sure that they don't feed on crop species or native species. And once we know that it's going to cause a lot of damage to the plant and that it's only going to feed on the target plant that we want, then we release those bugs into this environment. And so we're really trying to get the good bugs on the ground, feeding on the bad plants, and ultimately reducing the weeds and looking at a more of a natural balance that you see back in the plant's native range. Biocontrol takes quite a while to build up. Sometimes it can take 4 to 5 to even 10 years to start seeing the impacts of the biocontrol agents. The benefits of it is that once that weed population is being managed by it, you really don't have to do any more effort. And so it's sort of a trade-off, but it's really important to manage expectations when you're using biocontrol, because people tend to want a real fast result, and that's not how it generally works with biocontrol. So if people can recognize that maybe they have a weird plant growing on their yard, they didn't recognize it, but it seems like maybe it's doing something bad, that really allows, if you can say, hey, this is something weird, let's go out and look at what that is. And so with my work, I try to do a lot of education on weed identification. And then with the biocontrol component is how to best incorporate biocontrol into their weed populations. Because if that can be confusing and challenging for people to really understand.
Northern pike, not native to the Columbia Basin at all. and were illegally introduced in western Montana. And it's a species that has the ability to consume anything and everything that, it basically comes in contact with.
They eat like whole things. Like I found a whole baby duck once and an entire frog. So I would say if we had salmon in this area, they would eat everything.
We started to see this almost an exponential growth with northern pike that went from a population from a couple hundred fish to a population well over 10,000 just in a span of 5 to 6 years. The other thing that we also ended up seeing was a dramatic decline in the species that we saw within the reservoir itself. Pike are a problem, they're not an opportunity. What we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent those fish from further going down into what we call the anadromous zone, where you have salmon and steelhead that are down there. One of the things when it comes to non-native species is they know no boundaries. And it's a shared interest, I would say, that's not just amongst both tribes, states, and the federal government and locals, but we all have something to lose here. When it comes to the tribes, it's really important because they rely upon those native, whether it be camas or whether it be native bull trout or west slope cutthroat. Those are the species that historically, they thrived upon, and that's what we're trying to rebuild.
Well, if you look at tribal cultures historically, the land sustained them. They were very appreciative of what the land did for them. We didn't really have concepts of ownership like Western civilization does. And really that philosophy of the seventh generation, that what we're doing now will impact the generations after us, and we're planning for that seventh generation ahead of us. So really I think if we're successful as a natural resource division, we have set up the reservation so that we can be sustainable over the long term and resilient to not just disturbance events, but also climate change that we expect to see over those next 7 generations. So that's a huge period of time.
And if you see something that looks like it's invasive or something's taking over an area that you don't recognize as being there, get it ID'd. We have resources through the Extension Office, through the Range Department to get those ID'd free. Bring it to us or take a photo of it and just text it to us or email it to us when you get a chance, and get it ID'd, because it could be a rare and endangered plant, so you don't want to pull it up, or it may be something coming back because of better management and things that you haven't seen in a while. But if it is an invasive species, you want to catch it early.
And if we do not continue to work with our weeds and managing those invasive species, we won't have land for the next generation, and that is our ultimate goal. We need to make sure that the land is here for future generations to admire, to live on, to thrive. So if we do not get a handle on the weeds, we lose control of our land.